Hello, good day. Welcome to the Division of Education, Innovation and Energy e-learning program. I am Ms. Jamila Amin-Bacchus, your facilitator for CAPE Biology. So if we look at this homeostatic control, this loop, which is showing negative feedback, we can see, let's say you have a control variable. Let's say we're looking at the level of testosterone, which we know is a male hormone. It's a male hormone that triggers and would increase the rate of spermatogenesis, the formation of sperms. So when you have the level of testosterone going very high, increasing greatly, so this will represent a change in the control variable, the change in the testosterone. This will be picked up by an endocrine gland. In this case, the high levels of testosterone will be picked up by the hypothalamus, which will produce GnRH. All right, gonadotropin releasing hormone. And this in turn will release a hormone which has an effect on the target cells or tissues, an effector. In this case, it will be eventually it will have an impact on the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, which is producing LH and FSH. The effect it will have is that the production of these hormones will decrease, and therefore the way in which these hormones will impact on the testes is also going to suppress the production of sperms and testosterone, and so you will have a reduction in the original increase. So that is a negative feedback where one thing, through the way in which it is impacting on the other parts of the system, is controlling itself, more or less. So you will not have an increase beyond what the system can deal with. So here we are looking at the hormonal control of spermatogenesis. Good? Now this is a negative feedback loop. This demonstrates a negative feedback loop. You need to be able to draw this negative feedback loop. It don't have to be identical to this. There are many different ways in which you can draw this, but you have to be able to do this. Now, let's look at this. We start with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is located in your brain, and this is an endocrine gland in that it is producing a hormone called GnRH. GnRH stands for gonadotropin releasing hormone, and this hormone has a direct impact on the pituitary gland, and this pituitary gland in turn is an endocrine gland which is producing LH and FSH. Good? So the anterior pituitary gland is producing these other hormones in turn. Now these hormones have a direct impact on the testes. FSH impacts on the Sertoli cells, and LH impacts on the Leydig cells, also known as the interstitial cells. Now if we make a little diagram here, and these circles we draw represent the seminiferous tubules in which you have the production of the sperms. Now there are particular cells in here you will recognize and remember. You have Sertoli cells, and these cells play a very important role in the production of sperms. They help to nourish the sperms, and so they can increase the rate of spermatogenesis. You also have some cells that are found in the area between adjacent seminiferous tubules. These cells are the Leydig cells, otherwise known as the interstitial cells. Now these cells are responsible for the production of testosterone. But for testosterone to be produced, as you see here, for testosterone to be produced, you must have LH impacting on these Leydig cells. So as LH production increases, you will have more testosterone being produced. As testosterone level increases, this in turn will have an impact on the Sertoli cells. So this will impact on the Sertoli cells. But the Sertoli cells need to be more receptive of the testosterone. And so FSH plays a very important role in ensuring that the Sertoli cells will facilitate the testosterone, which in turn will cause the increase in spermatogenesis, which is occurring around the Sertoli cells. However, as the production of testosterone increases and you have the amount of sperm production increases, that in itself is going to now have the production of inhibin occurring within the Sertoli cells. So there's another hormone that the Sertoli cells will produce called inhibin. And what inhibin does? It has a negative feedback, as we see here, on the anterior pituitary gland. So if it has a negative feedback, means that as inhibin production increases, it is going to suppress the activities of the anterior pituitary gland, and so these activities are going to slow down. Good? And so eventually the whole activity within the testes will slow down, and so sperm production will cease. Besides inhibin, you are also seeing testosterone itself having a negative effect or negative impact on the anterior pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. So testosterone itself is going to have a negative feedback on the system, and so it regulates itself. Testosterone more or less will regulate the production of the hormones, which will itself produce it. And this is a negative feedback loop, and this controls spermatogenesis in males. What about in females? Well, you also have a negative feedback mechanism in place. Again, you have in the hypothalamus in the brain of the woman, you have the production of GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone. This in itself has an impact on the anterior pituitary gland, which normally will produce FSH and LH. Now, we saw in the menstrual cycle the importance of FSH and LH on the ovaries. Remember, FSH will trigger the development of the Graafian follicle, which is in the ovaries. And you will have the ovaries in turn producing estradiol, which is estrogen, and progesterone. If you recall, estradiol has an impact on the production of LH because estradiol has a positive impact on the production of LH. However, as you increase the production of estradiol and progesterone, as happened after LH production surges, you remember estrogen production and progesterone production will increase. As their production increases, they will in turn have a negative feedback on the hypothalamus and a negative feedback on the anterior pituitary gland. So eventually, as these levels increase, they are going to shut down the system. What does that mean? Yes, I hear you. If you cannot get this occurring, then you cannot produce a secondary oocyte. You cannot have the process of oogenesis continuing, and so you will not have a secondary oocyte being released during ovulation. And this is exactly what will trigger this being effective, right? Because as you produce progesterone and estrogen, it is going to slow down these activities, and so you will not be able to produce
a secondary oocyte. So once a woman is taking these pills, she will not be able to have another baby form. You will also see that as we go on, that these hormones will increase as a woman becomes pregnant. The placenta takes over the role of producing estrogen and progesterone, so that again, when she's pregnant, you don't want the development of another baby. Good? You don't want another fetus to develop. So these hormones have a negative impact, and they're going to suppress the production of GnRH by the hypothalamus. So while she's pregnant, she will not be able to get pregnant again. Right? We just want to note, as I indicated, the woman, she can use a birth control pill. We do have these pills on the market, and we have two types. We have the combined pills, but they contain two hormones, estrogen and progesterone. And these hormones, they are chemicals that control how different parts of your body work. They are taken every day, and they prevent pregnancy by keeping the ovaries from releasing eggs. The pills also causes cervical mucus to thicken and the lining of the uterus to become thin. The endometrium will be very thin, and of course, if that happens, then you will not have implantation taking place. Right? The thickening of the cervical area, the cervix, with mucus will allow the sperms not to be able to penetrate. So these combined pills, it's made up of two different hormones, and this has the impact of not allowing the development of the Graafian follicle, and so not allowing the egg to be released. And now there are different ways in which you can take these pills. And so there are some persons who, you may have an egg develop, right? You may have a cycle, and you can actually regulate how it is done. There are some persons who have no cycle at all, no menstrual flow at all. It's according to how you use the pill, but it's very effective. It is actually, it said it is 99% in some cases effective against pregnancy. It can go as low as 92%, but it can get up to 99%. The other type of pill is the progestin-only pill, only progesterone in there. There are mini pills, they contain only one hormone, progestin, which causes cervical mucus to thicken and the lining of the uterus to become thin. This keeps sperm from reaching the egg less often. They prevent pregnancy by keeping the ovaries from releasing eggs. Now, do we have a pill for males? Well, I'm sure some women will love to have that happen, but do you think men in this part of the world will really go for something like that? I don't know. Quite interesting. Dimetandrolone on Decouple is, as I said, a drug in trial. And what about it? It will suppress testosterone production. It actually looks very similar to testosterone. So it actually will fit into the place that testosterone would fit. But it will not stop sperm production. All right? It will suppress sperm production. So will it be effective? Well, time will tell, because as I say, it's still a drug in trial. So let's go back to our questions. Give a concise explanation of how combined oral contraceptives work to prevent pregnancy. As I said, this was a CXC question that was asked. To answer the question, we have the combined oral contraceptive pill, which is a synthetic form of the hormone, progesterone, and estrogen. So we say it's a synthetic form. It's a man-made form. And they prevent ovulation by maintaining more consistent hormone levels without a peak in estrogen. So remember, we would have said that when estrogen peaks, then you would have had LH being released, and LH would have in turn caused the secondary oocyte to be released from the Graafian follicle. So if estrogen does not peak, then we do not have this release. And that is how this pill works. You also have, it makes the lining of the uterus thinner and thus unreceptive to the implantation of a fertilized egg. It also triggers the thickening of the mucus in the cervix. This blocks sperm so it can't swim to the egg. So you're seeing this question was worth 3 marks. Good. It is unclear exactly how they would give the marks because this part seems to be the more weighty part, but I would suggest you put in all 3 of them to be able to get those 3 marks. Your marks, is very important that you look at your marks and look at the weighting that the parts of the questions may have in order to get maximum marks. So the second part of this question read, a young recently married couple seeks advice at a family planning clinic. The 23-year-old female explains that her last normal menstrual cycle started 2 weeks ago, and they both confirm that they have not engaged in sexual intercourse since then. She would like to begin using combined oral contraceptive immediately, as she has been advised that there are no medical reasons which prevent her from using this form of contraception. Suggest what advice should be given to the couple about the most appropriate way to use combined oral contraceptives, and include in your account justification of your advice in relation to the physiological details provided by the couple and your knowledge of the menstrual cycle. Now, this is a loaded question, and I would suggest to you that you take your time and read it maybe about 3 times, if need be 4 times. It's better you take your time and read the question, understand the question, than you jump to answer the question and then you have gone in the wrong. Another thing you need to look at would be the marks allotted, because this is what will determine how you are going to answer the question. Justification, physiological, I would suggest again, when you are reading the question, please underline the key parts, the parts that jump out at you. Underline those parts because they can help you in how you answer your question. So let's go ahead to the answer. Okay, so let's answer the second part of the question. The advice to the couple. The woman can begin taking the combined pill, the combined contraceptive pill, immediately. So she can. Remember, she has been 2 weeks into her menstrual cycle. She can take it immediately. However, they should use another method of birth control until the end of the current cycle. Thereafter, the pill can be used in isolation. So she can use the pill alone after that period to prevent pregnancy. Why? Why this advice is given? The justification. The menstrual cycle rotates every 28 to 32 days. Now that is more or less normal. There are some people, however, who have a year cycle or a 3-month cycle and so on. There are differences in your cycle. So you have to know. One point to note, remember I said the ovulation takes place on the 14th of the month? Well, an important point to note is that ovulation always takes place 14 days before the beginning of the new cycle. So if you have a year cycle, then ovulation will be taking place 14 days before you start to bleed, because it may be difficult to ascertain exactly when ovulation will be taking place. But you have to keep a record of when your cycle begins, and so you can see, you can chart the course of your cycle. So we go back here. Day 1 is the first day of bleeding. Ovulation takes place on day 14, as I say, in a normal cycle. So if 2 weeks has passed, then the woman may be presently ovulating. Right? So in a 28 to 32 day cycle, at about day 14, which is 2 weeks, she may be ovulating, either currently or maybe the day before or the day after, in which case the egg may still be viable. And so it is an unsafe period of the cycle, so that she should not, even if she takes the pill currently, it will not provide her with protection, because the Graafian follicle from the last cycle, from the cycle at the beginning, from day 1, has already been developed. So what she should do, she should start to take the pill so that it begins to prepare her body, but she should also use another form of contraceptive in conjunction to taking the pill until she reaches back to day 1. Then she only needs to take the pill in isolation. She don't have to take the another form. And so that is for not getting pregnant. Of course, people may use other forms of birth control, like the condom, for other things other than getting pregnant, like transmission of infections and so on. So this question, it was a 2-part question. They first asked you for the advice to the couple, and then they asked you to justify why you would give that advice. Good? And so the 5 marks, how do you think this 5 marks should be shared? Good? You can say that 3 marks will be given to one part, and another 2 marks to be given to the other part. Good? I would have given the 3 marks to the first part and the 2 marks to the second part. So let's look at the second question we saw at the beginning. Outline the roles of follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH, and luteinizing hormone, LH, in the regulation of spermatogenesis. So they would have laid it out here for us, and you're supposed to write within the lines. I would suggest you should write at least 2 lines of whatever your answer is. You have 3 marks allotted to you. So again, one question will be carrying 2 marks and the other one 1. So look at the weighting. FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, remember it is produced by the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland. What does this have its impact on? FSH has its impact on the Sertoli cells, which are the cells which play a fundamental role in spermatogenesis. FSH ensures that the Sertoli cells can accept testosterone. Right? So testosterone, which is produced in the Leydig cells, they will have their impact on the Sertoli cells. And so FSH makes the Sertoli cells more permeable for testosterone to be able to get into the cell and have its impact. LH, on the other hand, is produced by the Leydig cells. And these Leydig cells, or interstitial cells, they are produced, they are found between the seminiferous tubules, and they in turn produce the testosterone. Right? And so if the LH does not allow testosterone to be produced, then the Sertoli cells will not be effective in what they do. So the roles of the FSH and LH, The FSH impacts on the Sertoli cells and in making the Sertoli cells more permeable to testosterone, and LH will impact on the Leydig cells and impact on the production of testosterone, which in turn, of course, the testosterone will allow the Sertoli cells to produce more sperm or increase the rate of spermatogenesis. Good. So we would have looked at the timeline and activities occurring within the menstrual cycle. We would have explained the hormonal control of spermatogenesis and oogenesis. We would have appreciated the principle of negative feedback. You should be able to draw a negative feedback loop for both spermatogenesis and oogenesis. And you should be able to discuss and appreciate how the anatomy and physiology, how the makeup and the way it works has been applied to contraceptive methods, the pill. How is the knowledge that we have of our anatomy and the way our body works allowed us to be able to produce such a product as the pill and answer questions that are more or less those that will be posed by CAPE. I am certain that you are a little more informed of this process of spermatogenesis or the control of spermatogenesis and the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle, it's very, very important that women appreciate this process as well as men, because for a person to become pregnant, it means that the Graafian follicle would have released the secondary oocyte and a sperm would have entered. Good? So that we need to appreciate what is happening all along this cycle and so be able to manage ourselves better to avoid pregnancy where we don't want to become pregnant. I trust that you will continue to follow this program and continue to be edified as we go further. Remember, this is catering to persons who are currently doing the CAPE CSEC exams in Unit 1. And I trust that you will do well and go on to do very well in your exams.